Hello, this is Thomas Lancaster from Birmingham City University, and in this video I want to bring together the findings from the Higher Education Academy Changing the Learning Landscape project, developing podcasts to assist students with the production of a professional online presence. This is a project which was funded by the HEA, the Higher Education Academy, which I've been working on for a few months now, off and on, based around some of my own teaching materials and resources I previously developed and have since improved for the HEA. And really this video is focused particularly on my findings. It's likely at some point I'm going to expand on this, perhaps make it into the form of an academic paper or a formal poster, but I wanted to be able to put some findings out there for people who are interested in getting into podcasting with their students, because to be quite honest, it's been quite a tricky road with a few bumps in there which I didn't originally anticipate. As part of the learning process, my personal learning process for podcasting, I had to choose a topic to work on, and I picked an area which I'm quite well known for in the academic world, particularly in the UK. I've given lots of talks on this area, and you can find a lot of my talks, my academic papers, my blog posts on professional online presences already out there. But I also think this is an area which is lacking in some institutions, or perhaps because some lecturers don't really have the skills to teach this, and it's a really important aspect for students looking to become employed to think about. So how do we define professional online presences? Well, it's the set of websites and social media profiles that are used by a student to represent them online. So for instance, most students have a Facebook profile, and a Facebook profile will be one part of their professional online presence. I bring Facebook up because it's always an area that interests students. It interests me as a Facebook user, but because people are sometimes quite thoughtless about the type of material they put onto Facebook, and yet employers know that. And for many large employers now, it's one of the sites they check by default when they have an application for a student for a job to find out more about them. And very good information on Facebook, of course, can help people to get a job. Poor quality information can rule them out or make them seem less desirable than the other applicants, and it's a competitive world out there for the job process. So I want to put together some resources to help students to develop their own professional online presence, not just a Facebook profile, but all the other sites that come with this, and I'll show you some examples of other sites, my own professional online presence, on the next slide. But the aim for that project, that's almost a sideline. The aim for the project for me personally was to learn podcasting, because I do a lot of presentations, both live and video presentations like this one. I'm quite happy communicating in different forms, but podcasting is quite a different form to those. The big challenge to think about is that podcasting is, the way I've looked at it, purely an audio medium. Yes, you can get video podcasts, but I've stuck with the traditional audio podcast that students can listen to on their MP3 player, perhaps on their phone with headphones, while they're going about their day-to-day business. And I'm sure, like me, you've seen students who barely remove their earphones from their ears throughout the day. They even dislike taking them out of their ears during lectures. So podcasting for me has a lot of advantages because it does appeal to the way that students work. So these are some of the components that make a professional online presence. I've chosen these for my academic professional presence, so you can see such things as my main website there at the top left, split into different sections, so it's where people can find out more about me. So if I was looking for a job, which of course is part and parcel of academic careers when we move positions just like students do, then people can find out more about me on that site. And I think it's really important for me to have a site to represent myself, to show students what is available to them. And that site, incidentally, was put together very easily in a day. It's been updated a bit since then, but for technical students or even non-technical ones, putting these sites together needn't be onerous and difficult. The second site along there is my Storify, so when I'm involved with giving talks, organising events, workshops, conferences, and I have a Twitter hashtag, it's very good to collect together the information about that afterwards. You'll see some of my contract cheating work there, and some of my employability work, particularly with the HA on vendor resources. Moving across, you can see what happens when you search for me in Google. You can see things like my official university profile from Birmingham City University, my website, my Twitter account, which again is an important part of my professional online presence. I communicate with my students on there. I post teaser articles, things to read, communicate with their academics. You've got there at the right my blog. Uh, for instance, you've got one of my talks on there, which I've included the slides about contracting in 2014, which was a research seminar, well, really a teaching seminar I gave at the University of Sheffield. You've got my Google Scholar profile at the bottom. For academics, research publications are vital, and Google Scholar shows me as the top 10 publishers and researchers at Birmingham City University. And you've got my LinkedIn profile as well, showing some of my publications. So all the important things for me as an academic. What a student wants to represent about themselves is probably slightly different, but it includes some of those sites, particularly things like LinkedIn, particularly things like a website, a Twitter account, a Facebook account. I think they're all very important. These are the 8 topics I chose to develop podcasts on for professional online presences, and I chose these quite deliberately because I'd already produced a series of 8 talks on these topics for the Higher Education Academy. And those talks are available as open educational resources. If you're looking for areas to teach from, you can get the PowerPoint slides and edit them, but my impression is they haven't been as well used as I would liked, and I think a lot of that is because other academics aren't sure quite how to fit this within the curriculum, or perhaps they don't feel particularly comfortable teaching from this material. So I've taken these topics and used them as a basis for 8 relatively short podcasts, and they cover everything from an overview of professional presences, the preparation students need to do, the kind of profile text they need to write in advance, particular sites like LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube and other video sites, students' own website, and then the more advanced stuff, the promotional aspects students need to do when finding jobs, and other employability related areas I've used myself, that I've seen students do, and I've observed being used in the wider educational world. And so for me these proved a great starting point because I had the PowerPoint slides ready, giving me a set of talking points. I don't think they're quite perfect, but they're a good starting point. And if you are thinking of creating your own podcast, then I recommend, at least when you're starting out, you come up with some lecture material and base it on that, and you might find that you take 1 or 2 lectures and they can then become around 8 podcasts, because you don't want to be full lectures, and you'll find the way you present in the audio medium is very different to the way you present when you're face to face with students. How did I go about developing the podcast? Well, I've kept a blog detailing the development process, and you can find that at the URL on the screen, professionalonlinepresence.com/changing the learning landscape. It did turn out to be quite tricky, not so much the audio recording, which I was able to do, but the technical side of getting the podcast online, getting them listed within iTunes. But you can see a lot of my thinking about how I went around this on that blog in a series of posts, and feel free to leave your reply, and when I see those replies coming in, I'm happy to add some more ideas of my own and feedback and anything that will help you. And if you do create your own podcasts as well, feel free to advertise them if they're educational on that site too. You can access the podcasts as examples to show what I produced, perhaps use with your students. Again, the URL on the screen is professionalonlinepresence.com/podcasts, and you'll be pleased to know you can find these on iTunes. There on the screen is the podcast cover I produced. Just to give an idea, it's a word cloud produced with Wordle and a freely available and redistributable stock photo I've combined together, just to give a bit of an indication of what professional online presences are about. But if you do a search in iTunes for Thomas Lancaster or professional online presence, you will find these. You'll also find the link on the main professionalonlinepresence.com website to go with that. And when you subscribe to that, you'll be able to access all 8 of these podcasts. And so what kind of lessons have I learned from that development? Well, first of all, I think you should keep your podcasts short. People tend to have fairly short attention spans, and a 10 to 20 minute podcast, which is what I aimed for, worked quite well perhaps during a bus journey between lectures when students just need a quick break. And if they're so keen they enjoy them a great deal, they can listen to more than one of these after each other. And even if you have a lecture which would normally be 60 minutes and you make it into 4 podcasts, that's fine, but it gives students a bit more control of what they choose to listen to. It's the same reason why audiobooks tend to be split into relatively short tracks, or longer books are split into chapters, which can then become audio tracks. I do recommend you plan your podcasts from scratch rather than just doing what I know some academics do and setting an audio recorder in their lecture, recording the audio and then saying that's a podcast. It's not great because certainly when I present very differently to a live audience than how I do when there's nobody there. And the kind of pauses I might make during a live presentation and opportunities for students to ask questions, well, then it's not appropriate during a video and audio. So I don't work with those. You may want to create short parts of lectures. I think that's the best way to do it. You may want to replan your work and how you present it as well. And you need time. It will take time to learn how to podcast. It will take time to put these podcasts together too. And if you're working with an educational environment, perhaps you need to negotiate that time. You want to enhance your module, then I certainly know academics are teaching 18 to 20 hours a week, and that's before they start doing their marking, their preparation, dealing with emails and everything else that goes into being an academic, maybe even some academic research. And so finding time for things like this is really difficult. It has to be something that's negotiated. You have to see a benefit, perhaps looking for internal time release funding within your institution. And if anyone says, oh, well, you're doing 2 hours of podcast, it will take you 2 hours, then that is not true at all. Even if you did them perfectly first time, there is still editing, there's still a long learning process to do that, and that assumes you can just talk off the cuff with absolutely no preparation, which really isn't that easy. I recommend that you think about whether these podcasts need to be visual or not. That was a challenge I hit with my professional presences because I was finding myself wanting to show Facebook on the screen to show the privacy options. I was finding myself wanting to show LinkedIn. I was finding myself wanting to demonstrate using my own professional online presence or those of my students so that people know what they look like. And of course that's impossible in audio. You can talk about it. I'll get around this by mainly looking at a higher level and providing the background. Students will need to do a bit of work themselves to learn these skills anyway, and so I don't think that matters for these. Also, the layout of a lot of sites students use does change, so doing a step-by-step, you click this button first, you then type this into the menu, isn't the most useful thing for students anyway. But do make sure you're thinking about areas that work in a non-visual format, and some lessons and some academic subjects will work much better than others for that. Nobody expects your podcast to be word perfect. You're probably watching this video, listening to the audio and finding out it's not word perfect. Occasionally I correct myself. I add a bit more explanation. I'm not talking necessarily in perfect sentences. That's absolutely fine. Nobody expects that with an audio presentation or a video presentation. You don't even get perfect sentences on most TV programs which have gone through huge amounts of editing and had a vast expense taken to them. Just think about every time you tune in for a reality show or a talk show and the type of presentation you'll get from that. So don't worry about that. Of course, yes, you should try and use good English and talk reasonably competently, but it's not expected and it's not always necessary. Just concentrate on good audio quality because that really makes a difference. It's one thing students report back about is that the audio quality has to be good. The biggest technical challenge, as I've alluded to several times in this presentation, is making everything available on iTunes, getting your podcast live. I do think you should be aiming for podcasts to be more usable than just your own group of students. They shouldn't be continually referring to your own lecture notes or your own assignments that are coming up. They should be something that's more widely available, and by all means supplement them with local information, because they're providing a service to other academics who don't benefit from being able to produce podcasts of their own. But I found the biggest challenge was I set up a WordPress blog. I used a plugin to make the podcasts available, an RSS feed, and then to get them onto iTunes, and I just couldn't get all these different components to work correctly together. There's a bit more detail on the blog. I'm not going to bore you with a technical presentation at this point, but I certainly recommend you think about how you're going to work around that. You'll be pleased to know that I'm very happy with the final set of 8 podcasts, and from my own personal goal, I met that. My personal goal was to develop my own podcasting skills, and I feel I've done that. I feel much more comfortable now that I could go away and create another set of podcasts on a different topic. I could probably record this set again, they'd be a lot better, and make them available. But I don't have any immediate plans to do that. There are some podcasting areas I want to look into, for instance things like more open-ended series, although I certainly recommend you start off with closed series, something like 8 podcasts. But I am very pleased about the benefits that I believe these will have for the academics and for student employability. I hope you found this video about my experience podcasting useful. I'm happy to talk about this in more depth. If you want me to come to your institution and speak, by all means Let me know. There's a lot more material I can talk about, and there's a lot more detail I can go into and plan to go into when the time is right. You can find these podcasts and more detail on my website at professionalonlinepresence.com. And if you want to contact me, speak to me, stay in touch with what I'm doing, I'm on Twitter. My handle is at Dr. Lancaster. Hope you found this useful and use these podcasts with your students. By all means, contact me if I can help you with anything. Otherwise, thanks for joining me for this video in the Higher Education Academy Changing the Learning Landscape series, developing podcasts to assist students with the production of a professional online presence.